Well, the term natural science is an ambiguous one simply because, of course, everybody uses it. But the question is, what exactly constitutes natural science? And this is getting to the heart of the whole issue of what the second revolution, scientific revolution, is all about, is that from the side of the conventional science as we know it, natural science is simply studying what I would call the dead world. You know, it's what Aristotle, who actually came up with this, he was the first natural scientist, you could say. He came up with this distinction, which has existed up until maybe about 100, 150 years ago in science, this distinction between what he called natured, meaning simply the outer appearances, the form. You see a tree, you see a tree, you see a car, you see a car, you see a person, I see you, you know, you're such and such height and weight and build and, you know, everything. Yeah. This is called the outer appearances. This is the nature as it presents itself in its forms. But he said there is another nature, which is behind the form, which he called natura naturata, or nature nurturing, or nurturing. And this is the living, moving, essential aspect of nature. So you could say that if someone gave you a box for a present and with nice wrapping paper on it, and you opened it all up, and whatever was in the box you just set aside as of no importance and focused on the box and the wrapping paper and said, well, thank you very much for beautiful wrapping paper and this box. That's in essence natura naturata, which is this kind of form nature, this outer form, outer appearances. Yeah. And so for Aristotle, of course, we have to deal with both aspects of natural science. But what happened, and this is partly why we have this second scientific revolution, what happened is that we lost this understanding and this connection to the internal essence, the natura naturans, the kind of living essence of the form. And it was like me looking at you and adding you up and adding all the chemicals and, you know, the weight and the height and saying, oh, that's Paul Chek. Well, that's not Paul Chek. That's the outer form Paul Chek comes in.
The wrapper.
Yeah, the wrapper, the paper, you can get dressed up really nicely or not, or, you know, whatever. You present yourself, the persona. But the real Paul Chek, the soul spiritual being, is not in the form. It's manifest and reflected in the form, but that's not you. If I really wanted to get to know you, I wouldn't just measure your height and color and eye color and, you know, whatever. So the point is that this is what happened to science, is that it became, and this led to the second scientific revolution we'll get into, but it became focused solely on the outer appearances, on the packaging. And it forgot all about life, we could say. So what we have in a nutshell, and the reason this second scientific revolution is so, well, revolutionary, but also so important, is that we've ended up not only with a general science of the dead world, what Aristotle called natura naturata, we've also ended up with a medical science or a healthcare science that is based on death, not on life. And its function is not to create health. Its function ultimately is to manage death. Because when you're dealing with the outer form, you're dealing with the world of the first scientific revolution, which we all know about, Galileo and Descartes and, you know, all of these people, Newton. What they've done is they've created the laws of the outer physical nature. Okay. But that world is subject to, as Newton pointed out, the second law of thermodynamics, which is it dies.
Yeah.
It's in the process of dying. Okay, it's always dying. The earth eventually is just going to die, disappear. And that's true as far as the physical outer form is concerned. But that is not true when it comes to life, to the inner essence, the world of life. It is not subject to the second law of thermodynamics. It's subject to a whole host of different laws. And those laws, if you understand them, take you into the true world of health, of life, of true healthcare and true medicine. And that is all about life, just as in scripture, Jesus says, I am life, I am the light, I am the life, I am the way. And it's not about death, but everything on the conventional medical side is all based on death. If you don't do this, you'll die.
Yeah.
They don't tell you how you can live. They just tell you, do this or you'll die. If you don't, inject your child with this, your child will die. It's a very negative death dealing system. It's not about, I don't teach you about nutrition in medical school. They don't teach you about how to go out and, get proper exercise and live proper life in order to, live a meaningful life. No, it's just all drudgery. You see that around you in terms of the economic system we have and the political system. It's all drudgery. It's all negative. It's all compression, control, all of that. So what happened is roughly about 1400s, when we had this first scientific revolution in Europe, in Western civilization culture, we lost, as Steiner calls it, the second fall. We lost connection to the inner essence of life. So all we could see was the outside. So we ended up creating a science from that, a very valuable science as far as the outer world is concerned, but it ended up creating a science purely of quantity, of appearances, of measurement, calculation, measure how much this weighs. When you went to high school, probably, I think everybody goes through this, I still remember it, and we studied biology. And the one thing that stuck in my mind about biology, two things. One, it was all about chemistry.
Yeah.
I wonder, what has that got to do with biology? The second is we were studying
dead things,
a selected animal, which was a frog. So of course, the famous experiment, you got this frog and you had to cut it up and you see all the organs. What's that got to do with life? What did that tell you about the frog? We end up with the same in the medical school system, so-called anatomy and physiology. So what anatomy do you get? You get dead anatomy. It's just the liver's here and the heart's there, and then you get a dead physiology, which is either all about chemistry or some form of physics. Well, the heart pumps the blood through the body. Well, it's nonsense. The heart doesn't pump the blood. The blood in the fetus is moving even before the heart shows up in the fetus. So the heart is not necessary for pumping blood. It has a different function. So the point is that we get this dead anatomy, dead physiology. Okay, but that comes out of the fact that all you can see is the outer form. Oh, I can see the liver, I can see the heart, I can see the heart pumping supposedly, and I can see the blood moving. Therefore, we just get this material, mechanical, chemical view of the world. So what happened is that the Greeks didn't have this. If you go back to Plato and Aristotle, they had a very profound understanding of what Aristotle called this living essence of nature. Okay, now Plato went one step beyond Aristotle. So Aristotle's a natural scientist, but Plato is a spiritual scientist. And Plato is not well understood because most of his works were lost. The ones we have are actually not the most important ones. What Plato in essence said, and this is what the Neoplatonists in the medieval times taught us, Plato basically said, there's a world of ideas. Now for Plato, the Greek word idean is not, oh, I have an idea, let's go watch a movie. That's not what Plato's talking about. What he's talking about is an archetypal product of the mind of God, if we want to call it, or the creator. And that archetype is like an idea in your head for making something. Oh, I have an idea. I'm going to make a spaceship. No one's ever seen one before, but you have in your mind, you have this idea. And that idea, that archetype, results in you producing a spaceship. Or let's say Steve Jobs with the idea for a personal computer. You know, no one ever seen this before. Or the iPhone. Well, everybody uses it now, but it's totally revolutionary. So these archetypes exist in the spiritual world. So the iPhone archetype exists in the spiritual world. Everything that was, is, and will be exists in the spiritual world. That's Plato's spiritual science. And Rudolf Steiner picked up on that. And so basically, people, geniuses, get an inspiration. Where did Steve Jobs get the idea for an iPhone? Well, he got it through, we could say, creative inspiration, and then developed it through creative imagination. So all of that Plato and Aristotle understood and was part of Greek science, okay? But by the 1400s, it was lost. Human consciousness had changed to the point where it could not see into the essential, the super sensory world anymore. Okay, we lost that, and we focused on the immediate world. So now the success of the first scientific revolution, it was a big success. I mean, it was massive in terms of our ability to understand and manipulate the world of form, of appearances. Send a man to the moon, supposedly, if we did or we didn't, but supposedly, you know, look at all the technology. You're talking to me on this, you know, technology. That wasn't possible before. It's just astounding how much came out of that first scientific revolution. As a result of the success of that first scientific revolution, roughly around the beginning of the 1700s, the real top scientists, thinking scientists, decided that they were going to try to crack the mystery of life, okay, because they knew this had nothing to do with life. Now, of course, they've got this model which was wildly successful. And even by then it was wildly successful. Of course, since then it's become even more so. But even back then it was quite impressive with Newton's laws and Lavoisier and the chemistry, etc. They decided to tackle the whole problem of life. The problem there was that they tried to use the same methodology of chemistry and physics and apply it. So they started looking for, well, where is life in the human body? Oh, it's in the nerves, it's in the blood, it's in the muscles, it's in the, you can run electric current through the body. Oh, look, the muscles move. Oh, that must be where the life impulse is. But by about the middle of the 18th century, it became clear that they were getting nowhere. Okay, they were not cracking the code. And so what emerged out of that was an attempt to develop a different approach to life. And this is what we call the Romantic movement. Okay. Now, for most of us, the Romantic movement was about a bunch of poets wandering around and singing songs and the arts and romantic painting and all of this. This was not the essence of the Romantic movement. The essence of the Romantic movement was to use the arts to develop a method to get into nature, to get past the veil of the outer appearances into the essence, into the inner sanctum, let's put it that way. And the keystone for that was, prior to that Francis Bacon.
Yeah.
And second, at that time, launching it was Goethe in Germany. Now, most people see Bacon as a mechanist, and he's the essence of the scientific method. You know, you study things and you catalog things and you quantify things and you tally up things. But that was not Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon was, you could say, connected to the old Platonic impulse. And the essence of what Francis Bacon taught was that unless you approached an inquiry with an archetype, a Platonic archetype, which he called the dry light of reason, the siccum, lumen siccum or something, unless you had that, you would get nowhere. You would just be an empiricist. Well, let's test this. Let's throw this at the wall and see if it sticks. Let's try this. Let's try that. He said the only valid scientific inquiry, science, rational inquiry, would be one that was guided by this light of reason, which is this Platonic archetype. Now, how do you get that? Well, through inspiration. It comes to you. You open yourself up to the spiritual world and you get this inspiration, you know, whether the Einsteinian light bulb lights up above you and all the cartoon characters, oh, you know, or one day you just have this idea, where did it come from? And why did it come to you, etc. But this was Francis Bacon. So they've taken his name in vain in the sense that they've just said, well, let's just try empirically. That's what medicine is right now. It's empiricism. Let's try this drug, see what the effect is. But there's no idea behind it. There is no rational guidance from the supersensible world behind it. So it is purely dead. It's about dead matter and death.